My parents said, "You're no longer our son," over a lie. 7 years later, my ex-brother-in-law sent the truth. "You are no longer my son. Get out." My father's words cut deeper than the rain soaking through my clothes that night. I sat on the curb, watching my family's silhouettes move behind drawn curtains, all because of my sister's perfect lie that took 7 years to unravel. The email subject line seemed to pulse on my screen. About your sister's past. My apartment fell silent except for the hum of my computer and my suddenly shallow breathing. I hovered the cursor over it, my heart hammering against my ribs. Something about those words felt like a premonition, like opening Pandora's box. 7 years. That's how long it had been since my family cast me out like garbage. I was 22 then, fresh out of college with nothing but optimistic dreams. My perfect family, dad, mom, and my older sister Melissa, had been my foundation. Melissa had everything: a successful career, a beautiful home, and Ryan, her devoted husband of 3 years. A perfect life, until the night she burst through our parents' door, mascara streaming down her face. "I filed for divorce," she choked between sobs. My parents rushed to her side while I stood frozen in the doorway. "Ryan's been sleeping with Sophie," she spat, her eyes finding mine with unexpected venom. Sophie, my friend, the woman I'd introduced to Ryan for a business project. "You did this," Melissa hissed, her finger pointed at my chest. "You destroyed my marriage." The accusation hit like a physical blow. "What? That's insane. Do you have any proof?" My voice sounded distant, even to my own ears, but proof didn't matter. Not to them. Mom's face crumpled. "How could you bring such shame to this family?" Dad's expression turned to stone as he stepped toward me. His eyes, once warm with pride, now burned with disgust. "You are no longer my son," he said, each word precise and final. "Get out of my house." I remember how the rain felt that night, soaking through my hastily packed bag as I sat on the curb outside the only home I'd ever known. The porch light switched off. The lock clicked. Inside, my family continued without me, their silhouettes moving behind drawn curtains. I sat there for hours, rain mixing with tears, clutching my phone and waiting for someone, anyone, to call and say it was all a terrible mistake. Nobody did. Why? The question echoed in my mind as headlights occasionally illuminated my pathetic figure on the sidewalk. Why would they believe her without question? Why would they throw away 22 years of love in a single night? That question haunted me for 7 years. Until now, as I stared at this anonymous email that promised answers I wasn't sure I was ready to face. I wandered the streets for hours that night, rainwater seeping into my bones, before I finally worked up the courage to knock on Jason's door. It was past midnight when he opened it, his annoyance instantly transforming to shock at the sight of me. Soaked, hollow-eyed, clutching a duffel bag like it contained the remnants of my shattered life. "Jesus Christ, Lucas, what happened?" He pulled me inside, wrapped a blanket around my shoulders, and poured whiskey into 2 glasses. As I told him everything, his expression hardened. When I finished, he slammed his fist against the coffee table, making the glasses jump. "I can't fucking believe they do that to you. Without a shred of evidence?" I spent the next week trying to fix things. I called my parents obsessively, 20, 30 times a day. When they finally blocked my number, I drove to their house. Mom opened the door just wide enough to see me standing there, rainwater still dripping from my hair. "Please," I begged, "just let me explain." The door slammed with such force that the welcome mat shuddered. Through the window, I saw her pick up the phone, mouthing words I could read clearly. "If you don't leave, I'm calling the police." My own mother. I tracked down Sophie at her workplace the next day. Her face paled when I explained why I'd come. "Ryan and me? Are you serious?" She looked genuinely horrified. "I've been with Thomas for 4 years. She pulled out her phone, showing me countless photos of her and a tall, bearded man. "I've met Ryan exactly twice, both times with you present. This is insane, Lucas." Something wasn't adding up. But what could I do? My family had already made their judgment. I threw myself into work, saving every penny. Jason let me crash on his couch until I could afford my own place. A shoebox studio with a leaky faucet and neighbors who fought at all hours. Better than nothing. The nightmares were the worst. Night after night, I'd jolt awake, hearing Dad's voice. You are no longer my son. Seeing Mom's tears, Melissa's accusatory finger. Some nights I'd call their number at 3 a.m. just to hear the automated, "This number has blocked you" message. Proof they still existed in the same world as me. 7 years passed, one day at a time, one foot in front of the other. I built myself back up, landed a management position, bought a decent apartment, met Liza, brilliant, kind-hearted Liza, who somehow saw something worth loving in the broken mess I'd become. Last month I proposed. She said yes. For the first time in 7 years, I felt like I might have a family again someday. Then Liza posted our engagement photos on Facebook, tagged me, made it public. The email arrived exactly 3 days later. Melissa lied. Read this if you want to know the truth. My hands trembled as I hovered over the attachment. 7 years of carefully constructed stability suddenly felt as fragile as a house of cards in a hurricane. The truth I'd been denied was finally within reach. But was I ready to face it? I clicked the attachment with trembling fingers, my breath caught in my throat. The subject line burned into my vision. Melissa lied. Here's the proof. The first screenshot loaded, and my world tilted on its axis. There they were. Dozens of emails between my sister and Josh, my college roommate. The same Josh who'd attended her wedding. The same Josh who'd consoled Ryan during their divorce. "I can't wait to leave him," Melissa had written. "Ryan's too stupid to figure it out. 2 more months, baby, and we'll be together." My stomach churned as I scrolled through their exchanges. Intimate details, plans for secret meetups, cruel jokes about Ryan's obliviousness. Each message was dated weeks before the night my family disowned me. But it was the email from 3 days before that fateful night that made my blood run cold. "Ryan's getting suspicious. I need to act first. If I blame him for cheating, Mom and Dad will believe me without question. And if I say Lucas was the one who introduced Ryan to this other woman, they'll direct all their anger at him instead of asking too many questions." "Are you sure?" Josh had replied. "That seems extreme. Lucas is weak. He won't stand up to the family, and once the dust settles, everyone will forget about him anyway." 7 years of my life, gone, because my sister needed a scapegoat. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, reading and rereading the evidence of my sister's betrayal. The room spun around me as rage, grief, and vindication battled for dominance. Who sent this? The email came from an anonymous address, but something about the writing style felt familiar. I grabbed my phone and scrolled through Liza's Facebook friends list, a habit I developed after our engagement announcement went public. And there he was, Ryan Matthews, still using the same profile picture from 8 years ago. My fingers moved before my brain could catch up. "You sent the email, didn't you?" 3 dots appeared immediately, then, "Yes, I have more to tell you. Can we meet?" 2 hours later, I sat across from him in a quiet coffee shop downtown. Ryan looked older, gaunt almost, with streaks of gray in his hair that hadn't been there before. But his eyes still held the same intensity I remembered. "How long have you known?" I asked, not bothering with pleasantries. Ryan stared into his untouched coffee. 2 years. 2 years? My voice rose enough that the barista glanced our way. "You knew for 2 years and said nothing while I know." He cut me off, his voice heavy with guilt. "I should have told you immediately. There's no excuse." "How did you find out?" "Sophie contacted me. She'd heard rumors about being the other woman and wanted to clear her name." Ryan's knuckles whitened around his mug. "She mentioned you'd been cut off from your family because of the accusation. I started digging. And you found the emails." He nodded. "Melissa wasn't as careful as she thought. She'd used our shared laptop." "Why now, Ryan? Why wait 2 years to tell me?" His eyes met mine, and I saw something there beyond guilt. Determination. "Because I have a plan," he said quietly. "And when I saw your engagement announcement, I knew you deserved the chance to clear your name before starting your new life." He leaned forward. "Melissa destroyed both of us, Lucas. Don't you think it's time she faced the consequences?" I should have felt hesitation, maybe even mercy, but all I felt was a cold clarity. "I'm listening." Ryan laid out his plan over the next hour. It was simple but devastating. Confront my family with irrefutable evidence of Melissa's betrayal. Force them to face what they'd done to me. "I've been gathering everything," Ryan explained, pulling out his laptop. "The emails between Melissa and Josh go back months before our divorce. I found them 2 years ago when I was cleaning out old devices." He turned the screen toward me, revealing a meticulously organized folder. I've got screenshots of text messages where she explicitly plans to blame you. I have the divorce papers where she lied under oath. And this, he pulled up a bank statement, shows where she sold your grandmother's ring to pay her attorney, the one she told your parents I took. My stomach lurched. That ring had been promised to me for my future wife. Another thing Melissa had stolen. Why would you do this for me? I asked, searching his face. You don't owe me anything. Ryan's expression hardened. She destroyed both our lives, Lucas. You lost your family. I lost years thinking I'd done something wrong. Justice isn't just for you, it's for both of us. We spent the next week preparing. I told Liza everything. She deserved to know what storm might be coming. To my relief, she held my hand and simply said, "Whatever happens, we face it together." Sunday afternoon, we drove to my parents' house, the same house I'd been banished from 7 years earlier. My hands trembled as I rang the doorbell, hearing familiar footsteps approaching. My father opened the door, his expression cycling rapidly from annoyance to shock to something unreadable. He'd aged. More gray hair, deeper lines around his eyes. "Lucas?" His voice was barely a whisper. "Hello, Dad." The words felt strange in my mouth. "May we come in?" He stepped aside mechanically, too stunned to refuse. Mom appeared from the kitchen, dropping a dish towel when she saw me. "Who is it, Richard?" Her words died as our eyes met. And then, from the living room, Melissa emerged. Her face drained of color when she saw Ryan standing beside me. "What are they doing here?" she hissed, backing away slightly. Ryan stepped forward, placing a thick manila envelope on the coffee table. "We're here to set the record straight, Melissa." What followed was the most excruciating 30 minutes of my life. We laid out everything, the emails, the text messages, the bank statements. With each piece of evidence, my parents' expressions shifted from disbelief to horror to unbearable shame. "You knew," my mother finally whispered, looking at Melissa. "You knew he was innocent and you let us throw him out?" Melissa's composure cracked. "Mom, you don't understand. Ryan was going to leave me. I panicked. I just needed someone to blame, and Lucas. He was always your favorite anyway. He would have been fine." My father, who had been silent throughout, suddenly stood. His face had transformed into something I'd never seen before. Pure, unbridled rage. "7 years," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "For 7 years, we mourned him like he was dead. We missed his graduations, his birthdays. We destroyed our son because of your lies." He turned to me, eyes glistening. "Lucas, But I raised my hand to stop him. "I didn't come for apologies. I came for the truth." "And now," Ryan added, gathering the papers, "you have it." My father turned back to Melissa, pointing toward the door. "Get out." "Dad," she shrieked. "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "I don't care," he said, the same words he'd once said to me. "You're no daughter of mine." As Ryan and I walked toward the door, my mother called after me, her voice breaking. "Lucas, please, can we talk?" I paused, not turning around. "Not today." Outside, the spring air felt clean, new. Ryan extended his hand, which I shook firmly. "It's done," he said simply. As we parted ways, I heard Melissa's wailing from inside the house. The sound should have brought satisfaction, vindication. Instead, I felt hollow, empty. Justice had been served, but 7 years couldn't be returned to me. I drove home in silence, Ryan's words echoing in my mind. "It's done." But was it? Could 7 years of pain truly end in a 30-minute confrontation? Liza was waiting at our apartment, her face anxious. "How did it go?" Before I could answer, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. "Please call us when you're ready." I silenced it and pulled Liza close. "It's over. They know everything now." That night, I slept dreamlessly for the first time in years. The next morning, a storm was brewing outside our window when the doorbell rang. Liza peered through the peephole and stepped back, her expression troubled. "It's your sister," she whispered. I opened the door to find Melissa standing there, drenched from the rain, mascara streaking down her face. Her designer clothes, always her pride, were soaked and rumpled. She clutched an overnight bag to her chest like a shield. "Please, Lucas," she said, her voice cracking. "I have nowhere else to go. Dad threw me out. Mom won't answer my calls." The irony wasn't lost on me. Here she was in the exact position she'd put me in 7 years ago. "You're surprised?" I asked coldly. "You lied to them for 7 years. You destroyed our family." "I called Josh," she continued, ignoring my words. "He's married now. Everyone's turned their backs on me." Her eyes, once so confident and calculating, now darted around like a cornered animal's. "You're my brother. Please. Just for tonight." I felt Liza's hand on my shoulder, a gentle squeeze. She'd leave this decision to me. "Do you remember," I said quietly, "when I stood outside our parents' house 7 years ago? When I called you begging for help?" Melissa flinched. "You laughed," I continued. "You told me I deserved everything I got." "I was scared," she cried. "I panicked. I made a terrible mistake, but haven't you punished me enough? You've taken everything from me." My laugh was hollow. "I haven't taken anything from you, Melissa. I simply showed them the truth. Everything that's happening now? These are the consequences of your actions." "So that's it?" Tears mingled with raindrops on her face. "Your revenge is complete?" "This isn't revenge," I replied, echoing Ryan's words from the coffee shop. "It's justice. You built this reality brick by brick, lie by lie. Now you get to live in it." I closed the door on her sobs. Through the peephole, I watched her collapse against the wall of our hallway, shoulders heaving. Liza's voice was soft behind me. "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. Over the following weeks, Melissa's life unraveled completely. She lost her teaching position after a mental breakdown in class. She moved into a shabby studio apartment across town. I knew because she kept texting me her address, begging me to visit. My parents tried calling several times, but I wasn't ready. Not yet. Melissa appeared at our door 3 more times. The first time, Liza sent her away. The second time, I wasn't home. The third time, a month after the confrontation, I opened the door to find her looking almost unrecognizable. Thin, unkempt, eyes vacant. "Please," she whispered, "I have no one left." For a moment, I remembered the sister who had taught me to ride a bike, who had defended me from bullies when we were children. Before ambition and selfishness corrupted her. "From this day forward," I said evenly, "I have no sister." The words were familiar, the same ones our father had used against me. As I closed the door on her broken expression, I wondered if I had become just like them in my pursuit of justice. That night, holding Liza close, I made a decision. The cycle of cruelty had to end somewhere. I wouldn't forgive Melissa, some bridges stay burned, but I wouldn't let hatred consume me either. Tomorrow, I would call my parents, not for Melissa's sake, but for my own. 3 months after the confrontation, as our wedding date approached, a text arrived from my father. "Your mother and I have been reflecting on everything. We made a terrible mistake, but we're still family. Let the past go. We would like to attend your wedding and be part of your life again." I read it twice before showing it to Liza. No apology, no acknowledgement of the 7 years they had erased from my life. Only a request to let the past go, as if it were a minor disagreement over dinner plans. "Will you forgive them?" Liza asked gently, her hand on mine. I looked at her, this woman who had stood by me through the darkest revelations of my past, who had never once questioned my worth or demanded proof of my innocence. "No," I said, feeling lighter than I had in years. "My real family is right here." I blocked their numbers that night. It was surprisingly easy. Our wedding day arrived on a perfect spring afternoon. Jason stood beside me as my best man, the friend who had sheltered me on that rainy night when my world collapsed. Ryan sat in the second row, a small smile on his face as he watched Liza walk down the aisle. "Do you, Lucas James Wilson, take Liza Marie Carter to be your lawfully wedded wife?" the officiant asked. Looking into Liza's eyes, I saw only the future. No shadows, no ghosts of betrayal. "I do." At the reception, Jason clinked his glass for a toast. "To Lucas and Liza, who prove that family is something you build, not something you're born into." I'd heard whispers about Melissa in the weeks before the wedding. She'd been fired from her new teaching position for erratic behavior. My parents had taken her back in, but according to mutual acquaintances, the atmosphere in that house was poisonous with resentment and blame. None of it touched me. Those people existed in another life, a chapter I had firmly closed. Later that night, as Liza and I swayed on the dance floor for the last song, she rested her head against my shoulder. "Any regrets?" she whispered. "About cutting them off completely?" I thought about it for a moment, genuinely searching for any lingering pain or longing for the family that had discarded me. "No," I said finally. "Sometimes family isn't who gives birth to you, but who stands by you when the world falls apart." I spun her gently under the twinkling lights. "I have everything I need right here." As the music faded, I kissed my wife, leaving behind the shadows of betrayal and the burden of revenge. Melissa would live with the consequences of her actions, just as I had lived with mine. But unlike her, I was no longer alone.